Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning. Here tonight to chat about this long-awaited Tool album, Fear Inoculum. Tool are legendary progressive metal titans. But for me, they've never really meant that much, to be honest. Never been really that big into their debut, Undertow. I mean, just in general, I've never been that deep into the progressive metal world, and this album just simply wasn't helping. Even if tracks like Sober are old metal classics for the books. Now, if I did have to pick a single Tool album to really live or die with, it would actually be Pneuma. I actually think this album is pretty friggin' great, and it's by far my favorite Tool album. Call me a noob or a peasant, or if you're Maynard James Keenan, probably something a lot worse, but I still go absolutely nuts for tracks like Stinkfist and Hooker with a Penis and 46 and 2. And a lot of the deep cuts there I found myself liking over the years as well. Now, before I go on, I just want to preface with something. As far as musicianship goes, 9 times out of 10, I actually think Tool are absolutely mind-bogglingly good. All around, their instrumentals have always been fascinating. As a matter of fact, Danny Carey might be the greatest metal drummer ever. But with Tool's discography, there is just so much. Their 2001 album Lateralis, not for me, man, not for me. Some tracks are fine, and yes, the instrumentals are impressive. But the overly long tracks and these lyrics that are just not nearly as impressive as people mark them up to be, just not for me, man. I didn't completely hate 10,000 Days. As a matter of fact, I think some of the singles are actually pretty great, and some of the deep cuts as well. But just overall, I've never been that much of a Tool guy. But yet, here we are. It's been 13 years since we've heard from Tool last. Let's chat about this new album. The album starts off with its title track, Fear Inoculum. And hey, what do you know? It has a very intense, overly long intro. Now, I do have to say, I don't mind the production here, and I think Danny Carey's very patient drumming is pretty cool. But for me, this is just very middle of the road. I'll say this isn't nearly as bad as I was expecting it to be, not even close. But there is also a ton of this overly long track that's just so cheesy. While I don't mind some of Maynard's more upfront vocals, some of these whispered vocals are just so campy. And lyrically, I don't know, I just think that so much of this is just so full of itself. Even the breakdown, if you even want to call it that, isn't really worth the 9-minute wait. Yeah, this track and a lot of this album, sadly, is middle of the road. However, there are a few decent tracks on here. Probably a few more than I thought that I'd expect here. Take, for example, Pneuma. I do really love the very dreary, defeated sound to this track. As far as Tool goes, this is a very strangely defeated sound. As far as Tool's discography goes, I'm just not used to hearing them this sorrowful. There's still a lot of elements that show up in a lot of Tool's work, like the precise playing and the immense tension. But honestly, this little bit of added emotion really has me hooked here. So much so that it helps me look past just how genuinely cheesy some of these lyrics are at points. And honestly, I end up getting lost in it by the end of this track. Something that rarely happens for me with Tool tracks. The later synths are hypnotic. The drugs are insane. Yeah, everything about this track just rubs me the right way. Invincible doesn't waste a lot of time, which when it comes to freaking Tool songs, that's a real treat. Once again, it's very tightly wound, very tense. Should not be shocking at this point. But honestly, I don't actually hate this tune. Once again, yeah, it's really not that bad. As a matter of fact, I think the pacing is perfect. And Maynard's vocals, which is something that I've always been a little on the fence with, here are rather infectious. Here, they have such a sense of mystery to them, which is a really nice element. Now, some of the guitars and bass thrown in aren't my favorite of the album. But once again, just overall, this kind of is working for me. And by the end of the track, Danny Carey's drums, they never cease to amaze me. But I do have to say, some of Maynard's vocal effects in the final few minutes are god-awful. Thank God the rest of this track just hits so hard. Now, on the digital version of this album, compared to the physical version of this album, you are going to find a series of instrumental interludes. Most of them are the vein of my existence, and literally some of the worst material here. However, Chocolate Chip Trip is not that. As a matter of fact, it's the best instrumental interlude here. There is some genuine tension on this track. This track is freaking twisted. While sometimes I feel like Tool fleshed things out a little bit too much, here I wish they would flesh it out even more. This is by far the hardest hitting of the instrumental interludes here. It's just so eerie, even when things get campy in the later moments. Like, I'm just gonna point it out, like, the synths, they were not necessary, sorry. But everything else about this track is top notch, especially that drum solo. Might be the best one here outside of the one on Tempest. By the way, let's chat about Tempest. Tempest is actually one of the most interesting tracks here. Dare I say, the best track here. It starts off, it's very mystical, very whimsical, very different. So much so that when that roaring riff does come in, it's actually one of the most exciting moments on the album. Honestly, I think this is just a genuinely great alternative metal tune. So much so that I feel like a lot of the elements here would have sounded great on their mid-90s stuff. And honestly, like, this might just be like a blast of nostalgia to some, but I think it's executed wonderfully. I mean, there is honestly nothing about this track that Tool hasn't already done in the past. And I do mean that. I mean, if you look at this album in general, they're really not pushing themselves that much. A lot of this album is just things that they've done in the past. But Tempest, being the longest track here, literally everyone sounds on top form, and I just couldn't be happier with this. I would even go as far as to say, as if I heard more of this sound throughout the rest of the album, I would have ended up loving this album. You're not going to hear me say this often, but this track is a true testament of what Tool can do when they're all on full blast. But oh dear God, the rest of this album is very bad. And I mean, like, seriously, very, very bad. We have Litanie Contre des Purs earlier in the album. And let me tell you something, I did 100% not need this right now. I mean, this album to me has barely gotten started. I didn't need a rest. And this is just such a waste of my time. It adds nothing to this album. And I mean literally nothing to this album. Like, get the hell out of my life. I really feel like this track was just placed here to annoy me. No thank you. Then we have Legion Inoculant. I swear, these interludes are going to be the death of me. Like, they added absolutely nothing to this album. There are tracks on here that show that the foursome could still seriously play, but, like, this is not what I showed up for, and I can't imagine, like, Tool fans being excited by this either. This is full-on progressive metal hell, and it's not fun for anybody, I feel like. Not that into Descending either. I kind of feel like this is the sort of track that I was, like, praying I hope that I wouldn't hear. Like, seriously, this track doesn't stick with me at all. 4 minutes in, I have no notes whatsoever because nothing has stuck with me. This is all just so toothless to me. This isn't fearless. This isn't forward-thinking. This is not progressive. I'm just going to go ahead and say it here. Tool sound legitimately tame. It is the second longest track here, over 14 minutes. And I have almost nothing to say about it. That can't be. Not a single instrumental sounds good here even. I can't. I have nothing to say. Now, I do enjoy the very icy vibes of culling voices. And I don't think that this track overall is terrible. As a matter of fact, I think it's got some interesting ideas here and there. As a matter of fact, I think that Maynard's vocals here might be his best. They're some of his most emotional. But this instrumental, come on, who's messing with me here? This is so boring. And honestly, halfway through this tracks, I'm looking back at lyrics and I'm swearing that Maynard is just reusing them from earlier projects at this point. Even in the final, more intense moments, like, I'm just not vibing with this at all. And we end up with another goofy interlude and mocking beat, and, like, come on, man. Like, this wraps up Tempest, which was this amazing tune that made me get a little bit of hope for Tool. But you're going to wrap that up and put that next to this, which is literally this goofball waste of a finale. Like, I literally think that Maynard and Tool are just screwing with us with this. I mean, if you like Tool messing with you, you'll love this as a finale. You might love this entire album more than me, but this just isn't for me. So, yeah, wasn't that big on this album. There are a few really good tracks on here, but the majority of this album did not need to happen. The abundance of unnecessary interludes and the overlong songs that really kind of point out that Tool are starting to run out of ideas. It's more depressing than anything. Yes, there are a few shining moments. Honestly, more than I thought. I thought I was going to be giving this much less of a score, to be perfectly honest. But still, I'm not into this. I'm not excited by this. It's very middle of the road. I'm feeling a light 6 on this new Tool album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.